So believe it or not, the number one reason most passport applications get delayed is because of the photo. Made a whole video about it, so that doesn't happen to you. But here's the thing you need to understand. A bad photo, a smudged signature, a badly printed application, these aren't going to lead to your passport application getting denied. It's just going to lead to it getting delayed. You get a letter, you fix it, you're annoyed, but you're fine. You're still going to get a passport. That's not what we're going to talk about today. What we're talking about today is a denial, a flat out no from the US government when it comes to you getting a passport. And what if I told you they could revoke your existing passport right now in your own home, making it totally useless? This isn't a simple paperwork error or a little mistake because you misread a direction. This is something a lot more serious. Odds are your name is on a list that you don't even know exists. I'm Sheldon with USPassportServiceGuide.com, and today we are going to go through the issues that stop your passport dead in its tracks, canceling your plans, or even those you haven't even made yet. Stick with me, because in this video I'm going to share 5 legal reasons why your passport application can be flat out denied or your existing passport can get revoked. We're going to cover how the revocation process actually works, and it's probably a lot different than you think. We're going to talk about the secret IRS rule that could block your travel and the exact dollar amount that sets it off. And most importantly, we're going to talk about the critical steps you can take to get off of these lists and hopefully reinstate your chances to get a passport from the US State Department. But take a deep breath. For 99% of you, this is more of a peace of mind thing, just to be aware of the things that can get in the way of your passport working the way you want it to. But for the 1% of you who actually find yourself in these situations, we're going to explain how it happens and all the steps to take to make sure you can reverse it if possible. And as always, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out a lot and make sure the information that we're sharing can get out to as many people as could possibly need it. So before I get to that list, what does revocation even mean? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's having your passport revoked, taken away. So how does the process work? Believe it or not, nobody's coming to your door and asking for your passport to be handed over. It's actually handled in a much more serious way. You're going to get a letter in the mail letting you know that your passport is being revoked. This letter is going to tell you you've been certified for revocation, meaning they've already done all the work here. Your passport is no longer going to work. Because the real power here is digital. The moment that letter gets printed out, the moment that decision has been made, your passport has already been invalidated in the federal database. That means if you try to use it, you're going to raise red flags for using an illegal passport, and you're stuck here in the United States, or worse, if you're abroad when this happens, you don't have a way to get back here. So once you've been notified that your existing passport's been revoked, you are legally required to surrender it, and they will give you instructions on how to do so. It's on you to get it done. The U.S. Department of State will provide details of exactly what you need to do. Do not delay, follow those directions. It's invalid anyway, might as well get it off your hands and start working on the process of putting things back together so you can get one that is valid. Now, like I said, if you're abroad when this happens, that's a whole nother ball of wax. You will probably be issued a limited validity passport, which is really good for only one thing, getting you back into the United States. It's like a one-way ticket. And the limited validity part means it's going to expire within a much shorter time period than a typical 10-year passport book. So now that we've established how serious this is, let's talk about the 5 different ways that could make this happen in the first place. All right, so the first and most common reason this happens has nothing to do with your application. It has nothing to do with your photo. It has to do with family court. If you're more than $2,500 behind on child support payments, your state child support agency is going to report you to the Federal Passport Denial Program. From that point, if you apply for a passport, you will be denied on the spot. If you already have a passport, you're going to be notified that that passport is being revoked. So what do you do if this happens to you? Well, the first thing is, do not call the U.S. State Department. It is entirely out of their hands. You need to settle up with family court. You must call your state's child support enforcement agency. Once you settle up your debts and get yourself back on the right track, you can get taken off the denial list and be able to either get a brand new passport or apply for one for the first time. But here's the big caveat. This is not an instantaneous process. You don't settle your debts and then immediately you can apply for a passport tomorrow. It can take 2-3 weeks, maybe even longer, for your payments to process and your record to be cleared. So if you're going through this process, do not make any travel plans. Don't book a flight next week thinking you're going to be able to get an urgent passport renewal or an urgent passport processing and be on your way because you've suddenly squared all your debts. It's going to take longer than that. You need to be prepared for that. Staying on the topic of money brings us to number 2. The IRS can actually make sure you are on that passport denial list or call for the revocation of your existing passport. So if you have what's called seriously delinquent tax debt, the State Department is going to be notified by the IRS, and from that moment on, you are not going to be able to apply for a passport, or your existing passport is likely going to be revoked. Okay, so what does seriously delinquent tax debt look like? Well, currently it means you owe $59,000 or more to the IRS. That figure includes the tax amount you owe, the penalties you owe, and the interest on all of that. So even though you may only think you owe in the $40,000 range, once we start adding in all the other penalties and the percentages on top, you're well over the threshold. If you find yourself in this situation with the IRS, you have 3 options. You can pay the debt. That's the easiest way to make all of this go away and get back on the path to recovery and getting a passport back in your hands. You can also get what's called an official installment agreement, where you've agreed to some sort of terms in which you will pay back the debt you owe. Or you can submit what's called an offer in compromise, where you offer to pay a certain amount and the IRS accepts that amount as satisfying your debts. But again, just like the child support situation, solving this is not fast. It could take 30 days or more for your payments to process and to get your name off the list. So again, don't make any travel plans in the coming future until this has totally been squared away and you have a passport in hand. These next reasons all involve the criminal justice system. This first one is a no-brainer. If you are a fugitive from justice, if there is a federal warrant out for your arrest, you cannot get a passport. If you currently have a passport, it has probably already been revoked. There's no talking your way out of this one. You're considered a flight risk. Having a passport is a pathway out of this country, which makes it a lot harder to get you back here to face the justice for whatever it is that got you in this trouble in the first place. The solution to this one is simple, but it's not easy. You got to resolve the warrant with the issuing court. You're probably going to need a lawyer. You're not getting a passport until that's resolved. This logic also applies to number 4 on this list. If you are on some kind of conditional release, parole, or probation, most of the time there are conditions that stipulate you're not allowed to have a passport. You have to surrender one if you already have it, or you're immediately denied if you try to get one. The only fix for this is to make sure that you have completely served your sentence before you try to apply for a passport. Even if you're just trying to line the timing up so you have a passport just in time for when your sentence is complete, it could potentially land you in a lot of hot water that you're even applying before you have the legal right to do so. And that brings us to reason number 5, the most fundamental of all of them, and the one that, for you viewers, may actually apply to you if you're applying for a new passport. In order to get and maintain a U.S. passport, you must be able to prove your U.S. citizenship. If you are unable to do so, or you are no longer a citizen but were issued a passport before you either renounced or lost your citizenship, it doesn't work. Your passport is tied to your citizenship. Now, this is very different than a delay that sometimes happens because a birth certificate copy is the wrong form or maybe it got a little smudged. This is very different. You have failed to prove your citizenship in the United States. And as long as that is true, you do not get to hold a U.S. passport. You must meet the legal burden of proof to prove you are a U.S. citizen. So worst case scenario, this happens because they've deemed your documents to be fraudulent. You're going to end up seeing a lot of other issues pop up beyond just not getting a passport in that case. Another common one, though, is what's called a delayed birth certificate. So if you got a birth certificate that was issued to you for the first time over a year after your birth, there's a much larger burden of proof on you to prove that you truly are a U.S. citizen. That's not to say there's not a way to do it, but be prepared for some additional scrutiny if that's the only proof you have. But let's say you find yourself in this situation. You applied for a passport and you didn't get a letter asking for new things. You got a letter telling you you were flat out denied from getting a passport. What do you do now? Well, for starters, you can't just reapply. You don't fill out the form and send everything back and hope it works out this time. It won't. You're on a list now. You got to get off that list and meet the burden of proof for your citizenship. In most situations, the fix for this starts by contacting your state's vital records office and getting what's called a letter of no record. This basically says that they do not have a birth record with your name on it tied to you and your citizenship status. That's what's going to open the door to allow you to use some secondary forms of citizenship evidence that otherwise may not have been open to you or accepted. From there, now you got to figure out how you're going to make your case. So sometimes that involves things like a hospital birth record, the one that's got your cute little footprints on it from the hospital when you were born. It also could be some religious documents like a record of a family Bible transfer or a baptism certificate. In some cases, early school records, early doctor's records, they also can be used. Depending on the timing, a U.S. Census record may actually be good enough. If you're lucky enough to have surviving relatives, Form DS-10 can be used to get a birth affidavit to show your connection to another family member that could be used to validate your citizenship that way. But here's the thing, in reality, one of those documents is not going to be enough. You need to gather as many as you can. You need to create a paper trail that proves you actually can get a U.S. passport because you actually are a U.S. citizen. My best advice in these situations, you're probably going to want to hire an immigration lawyer. They are experts at this type of research and will help make sure your application has as much validating information about who you are and that you deserve to have that citizenship document. But make no bones about it, this is a serious legal challenge. To be told absolutely not to getting a passport because of citizenship status, that gives you a pretty big mountain you have to climb to overcome and prove that no, in fact, you are a citizen and you can get that. Once you're clear of all these issues, you're finally ready to apply. But that opens a whole nother can of worms. What if you need to travel soon? Adding another 4 to 6 weeks of waiting for passport processing on top of everything you just went through may not be feasible, and you want to get on the road. So what do? This is where passport expediting services can come in. Sure, there are ways that you can go on your own to a regional passport agency, get an appointment, and hopefully work everything out with the documentation you need and walk out with a passport in anywhere from 1 to 14 days. But a passport expediting service can take care of most of that for you. They'll make the appointment, they'll attend on your behalf, and they'll make sure your documents get to who they need to get to and come back to you. If you've worked this hard to prove your citizenship, for example, you want to make sure you don't lose any of that. So if you know you're now in the clear and you need to get a passport as soon as within the next 24 hours, or at least within the next 2 weeks, check out a passport expediting service. We've vetted a whole bunch of them over the past 20 years, and we've put links to our top choices down in the description below. And remember, no matter what you're applying for, your paperwork still has to be perfect, or you risk a letter saying that there's a delay, adding additional weeks of processing time. So we have a video here for how to fill out Form DS-11 and skip all those mistakes most people make. All right, be sure to like and subscribe if this was helpful. See you next time. Safe travels.